Hey y'all, it's your boy Rich, and today we'll be talking about the Arthur TV series. Just to give you guys a little bit of context, I do not mean King Arthur. Even though he was a great king, he isn't the basis of this topic. The one I'll be talking about is Arthur the Aardvark. Arthur is a television series aimed for children around Peppa Pig's age to about regular show age, if you know what I mean. Arthur went on for about 24 seasons, actually 25, before it was taken off the air last year, and it's a show that's been around since the 90s. But before we get into any more detail, let's get into an origin story. Arthur, the TV series, started in 1994, back when he was on children's books entertaining us on the book fairs at the school. Around this time, the book series became popular enough to get the attention of PBS and WGBH. Those companies approached the author of the book, Mark Brown, to do a possible TV series based on his books. Mark Brown at first was kind of like no, because he wasn't a fan of television really. And based on our current status, I can kind of understand where he's coming from. But he gave it a chance because the series was to encourage kids to read books. The show was produced in the US, but the Canadians had a bit of ownership too, mostly because the voice actors came from there. As far as the show format and setting in itself goes, Arthur Reed, the title character, is an aardvark who lives in the fictional town of Elwood City. He's in elementary school and lives with his two parents and his sister, who actually is one of the most entertaining characters on the show. Along with that, Arthur interacts with friends that come from diverse ethnic and social economic backgrounds and occasionally meets with a large portion of his family. Elwood City is low-key based in Boston and has some similarities to that area as well, and a majority of the inspiration came from Mark Brown's childhood too. Each episode of the Arthur series ran for about a half hour, with 2 11-minute segments. It was done that way to keep the attention span of the kids because most kids can't stay still for very long. The episodes start off with one of the characters, mostly Arthur, speaking to the audience about something related to the title of the episode. The episode story in itself mostly relates to the real world, and that the audience doesn't just see the protagonist's point of view and may see the point of view of others, mostly Arthur's friends. Certain situations within the show may appear for these characters and are real life situations that the audience and themselves may face. Bedwetting, asthma, and dyslexia are some examples. And even though Arthur is the title character of the show, he may have a reduced role, or he may not even show up at all. In later seasons, the show actually would tackle super serious situations like cancer, autism, and even death. For the most part, everything in the shows that the show stood for was relatively relatable to the real world. Rivalries, sportsmanship, and even team bonding was shown, and early on, Arthur even played football. Like, my guy could have made it to the NFL, but the show was loved due to the fact of how real it was. They showed how people today actually thought, felt, or interact with each other, and even went as far as going to a character's imagination. It was really a GOAT show for real. Now, let's talk about the characters. The characters within the show were really unique because each one kind of represents a certain background or race. Of course, to block all that out, Mark Brown made most of the characters into animals, but if you look closely at each character, they definitely represent a certain background or a race. Arthur, for example, has a high likelihood of being a white kid with a two-parent home. Buster is a kid with a single mom. Francine is a black with blue-collar parents. Brain is black and has shown to have an African heritage. Muffy represents a rich white girl who's preppy, and so on and so forth. Of course, these backgrounds are brought up sometimes throughout the show to teach audiences about the importance of understanding certain differences among others. And some of the characters kind of represent someone within our own lives to some degree, whether it be a family member, a friend, or a neighbor. There were times within the show where it was praised for its comedic side. Like, these characters used to be on 10 all the time, especially at DW. Like, you gotta take a look at this.
Okay, see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
First off, they did not trust each other for shit. Second, Why the fuck they looking like that, dog? And last, how the hell did Arthur get the key? Was it the fight over the key? Regardless, this entire situation is wild. These scenes were galore throughout the early seasons, but they decided to tone them down a bit to kind of put a little bit more realism into the show. Although the later seasons also had their moments too. There was actually an episode where they actually had a war within their desks and kind of started a food fight in their classroom.
Kitten number 1, kitten number 2,
No,
kitten number 3,
I warned you,
kitten
Muffy.
number 4.
My comic! My cookies!
Hey!
Looking back at it, it's kind of reminiscent of a war we all know and love. The writers never held back at all, and that's one of the things that I really loved about the show. Also, Arthur was also not afraid to talk about controversial issues. Bullying was a central point in a number of episodes. There was even a gang called the Tough Customers who intimidated everyone who came within their sight. And then there was that one Arthur episode where Arthur Falcon punched his sisters back into the Dark Ages. But one of the episodes that caused the most stir was one of the recent episodes that touched on same-sex marriage. Mr. Ratburn, their teacher, became engaged, and the person he was married to was the same gender as him. From there, the internet ran with it like a rocket and really put the spotlight back onto the show. Of course, by then, Arthur was on its 23rd season and was on its way out, but in my personal opinion, this was their last attempt to attract the audience. Arthur was always a highly rated show. They often showed the realism within different situations, the perspective of others, and even offered solutions to the common day problems. And if there was no answer to those problems, they often would show an alternative to the situation as well. The only issue that this show ever had was its adjustment to modern times, and it's often a common problem within shows that have been running for a long time. You see, back in the 90s, Arthur was a bit more bouncy and active within all aspects of the show, which is the reason it got so many awards. But as time went on, the writers started to get a bit lazy. Well, I can't say lazy, but they did little to adjust with today's culture. Season 1 to about 6 was the prime of Arthur in the fact that it was rooted in more evidential value. But in later seasons, they turned the conflicts down a bit and made certain subjects too simple or too small to the point where they became predictable. Most people started to stop watching the series either because they got too old or it wasn't appealing. And finally, after 25 seasons, they decided to end it. Regardless, Arthur in itself was an absolute gem, and hopefully sometime in the future they should bring it back. What do you guys think? Should Arthur come back? Is it too dangerous to bring it into today's world? Is it boring, exciting, influential even? Let me know what you guys think. Aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Peace.